Welcome back to the Evolving Hunter podcast, where we talk with hunters, educators, conservation leaders, and everyday outdoors people about what it means to keep learning, keep improving, and keep showing up the right way. Whether you're brand new to hunting or still figuring it out, this show is about growing as hunters, sharing the lessons, and keeping the heritage moving forward. Let's jump into the show. Welcome back to another episode of the Evolving Hunter podcast. Thrilled that you've chosen to join us for another episode. We're thrilled today to have Brandon Maahs from the South Dakota Game, Fish, and Parks. Is that right? Yes.
That is right.
Joining us to talk about his journey in hunting as well as ways to get involved as new hunters in South Dakota. But thanks so much, Brandon, for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We've known each other for a while in the hunter ed world from when I was back at IHEA and now working in other areas of hunter education. So it's good to have a familiar face on the podcast sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think we'll be seeing you soon next week in Arizona. We'll be at the IHEA conference in Glendale, Arizona. So I'm excited to hang out with you.
Yeah, bring your shorts. It's going to be a toasty one.
I know. Yeah, it's going to be quite warm. But so as usual, we're going to kick off this episode by answering some listener questions. If I've gotten a number of listener questions recently, so much so that I've really been trying to, if I don't answer your question on the show, I've committed myself to answering them via email, because my whole goal, the spirit behind why this podcast exists is that I want to help novice hunters get started. Well, that goal was really great when I was getting 4 to 5 questions a week. It was very manageable, but now I'm getting a lot more per day. And so if it takes me a while to get back to you, please forgive me. I'm doing my best to answer your questions, but I always love to answer listener questions on the show because it does tell me what you're thinking and where you're at. And as I've said before, it honestly helps guide the show on guests I bring on, topics I bring up, things like that, because there's always themes to questions and what people are wondering. But neither here nor there. So we'll start off. We have 3 questions today. The first is from a listener named Randall, who lives in Aberdeen, South Dakota. I've been to Aberdeen, South Dakota many years ago when I was in high school. My church group, I'm not sure why they chose South Dakota, but we decided to go to South Dakota and help a church install an HVAC system. I was 17. I have no idea what I was doing, but we did it in Aberdeen, South Dakota. So Randall says, his email to me said, "Hello, Jay. I'm a new deer hunter and I've been practicing a lot with my rifle at the range. I feel pretty good about it, but I'm nervous about making the right decisions in the field when the animal isn't standing perfectly broadside like the diagrams show in my hunter education course." That makes sense. I understand the basic idea of aiming for the vitals, but the real situation seems like it could be a lot messier. Deer quarter towards you, deer quarter away from you, it moves behind brush, or it stops on an awkward angle. I don't want to take a shot just because I'm really excited. Can you talk through how a hunter should think about shot angles, which shots are responsible and which ones should be passed up? And how does a new hunter learn to slow down enough to make that decision in the moment? That's a great question, Randall. One that every new deer hunter, I think, frets about. And particularly in the early days, but even as an experienced hunter, you're always kind of trying to make those decisions, because you're exactly right. There's the pictures you see in hunter ed, it's here is broadside and the deer is completely sideways to you, right? Here is quartering away, and it's these perfect angles. And so there's some decision making in the moment for sure. Brandon, do you want to take a crack at kind of trying to answer this question a little bit?
Yeah. My mind's thinking about all sorts of stuff, my own stories, the experiences that I've had. I'm a seasoned hunter and I still face this dilemma every year when I'm out there hunting. I'd say as a beginner hunter, it's never a wrong idea to wait for that picture perfect broadside shot, especially on your first couple animals. I, so much of hunting is a mental game as much as it is a physical game and skills. That mental game, it that can be the piece that really keeps you from being successful as a hunter. And if you can make your first couple harvests on an animal and your the good quality shots, double lung, and the animal goes down within pretty short order, that will really boost your confidence. And then from there, you can start looking at and considering other types of shot angles. So then beyond that, I always picture, where is the bullet or where is the arrow going to exit? I think that helps me visualize where what am I actually going to hit? Because if the deer is quartering away from you and I aim right behind the shoulder, like we tell all of our hunter ed students, that bullet is going to go too far forward and maybe you only catch one lung. So you got to angle it back a little bit and aim for that offside shoulder. So if you can visualize where the bullet's going to exit, that will help visualize the path of that bullet and yeah, hopefully help you be able to identify if that's a good shot or not. On top of that, if there's a shot where you're like, oh shoot, I don't know if I can make that, maybe that's not the shot for you. Quick story, this past hunting season, I was pretty excited to get out there. I had a tag here in South Dakota that I had 6 preference points that I burned to get that tag. I had a new rifle in my hand. I was confident. I was headed 0 to 200 yards, confident beyond that. And I had this nice mule deer buck standing or bedded with some does. I crept into 200. He stood up. They kind of saw me as I crept in, and he's standing there quartering to me. And I'm like, oh, I should wait for a broadside shot because I don't want to ruin any of the meat. I don't want to shoot through that front shoulder and ruin some meat. And that buck never gave me a broadside shot. The only time his broadside was behind some brush. I didn't want to shoot through the brush. He ended up going over to a doe, then chasing her off and out of my life forever. So that was pretty
Out of my life
disheartening.
forever.
Yeah. I chased him. I never found him again. And that I had the setup. I had a monometal copper bullet that would have punched through that front shoulder without any problems at 200 yards. Like that deer would have been dead had I taken that quartering to me shot, but I just chose not to shoot in the moment. That wasn't the shot I wanted to take, and that was okay with that. Because once you start getting away from that broadside shot, that margin of error, it really decreases. That area that you have to hit becomes smaller and smaller the more deviation that it is away from that perfect broadside shot. So
Yeah,
I'd say as a beginner, just start broadside.
for sure. And I always felt like it's always like this moment, right? Of okay, now I'm excited, and Randall references this, like he's how do you handle the nerves about it as well? And when a deer is in motion, even and not moving quickly, but you're like, okay, here is a quartering toward shot, and you're like thinking about that, and then they shift slightly, and then your angle changes a bit, and so you're kind of left to like making the decision of when is this moment, when is the trigger pull going to happen, and so I think one thing that I've done in the past, as a still pretty new hunter, is like almost doing like scenarios with videos. Like you can look on YouTube. There's thousands of hunting videos and seeing like the angles. Because if you haven't been in that situation, Randall, I don't know if you've been deer hunting yet. It's just something that you're considering, like kind of seeing how the deer moves and how the angles are presented and when that hunter takes the shot. I'm not saying they're taking the perfect shot every time, but at least gives you a visual representation of like, okay, they're turning this way, I'm going to get this shot. It's just a thought. You can kind of put yourself in that situation briefly, and as you're watching, thinking about, okay, here's they're quartering toward, okay, another broadside, okay, now they're quartering away, and so it gives you some representation. I every time I think about shot angles, for some reason I have a story that comes back in my head. Of course it was not deer season, it was bear season in Pennsylvania, and a buddy of mine, we were up, I think we had hiked like like 900 miles, it felt like, to get up on this ridge. We were hunting bear and kind of moving. And we honestly, we just got tired. So we just sat down and just kind of hunkered down for a little bit. And I hear something coming up over the ridge. And the largest buck I've ever seen in my entire life emerged over that ridge and turned into this like perfect broadside and like turned his head toward me and just stood there for like, it felt like a minute, like forever, right? And in my head, I was like, this is the picture of broadside that they give in Hunter Ed right here. Like, this is the perfect picture of broadside. And I was like, dang. And so we just sat there. I know he didn't know we were there. He just kind of meandered around for a while. But I always think about that. Like, that's the picture. If I had a phone on me right now, I could sell that picture to other Hunter Ed people. We're like, here is a perfect broadside shot. But of course, it was bear season, not deer season. So that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, and it can be. There's plenty of shots beyond broadside that are perfectly ethical, good quality shots, but you have to know your own limit too. And so if you're not comfortable taking anything beyond a broadside, just stick to broadside. Get that confidence. That confidence is going to carry you further into your hunting career than shooting and wounding a bunch. That's hard to come back from. Even now, it happens. Bad shots happen, and it takes a little bit to work through that mental strain. One thing I was thinking, especially up in Aberdeen, like if you're hunting some more open stuff and you have some deer walk out in front of you and they're a little ways away, there's nothing wrong with taking a dry fire shot before you load a live round into the chamber. Just practice squeezing the trigger. If the deer's feeding out there and you feel like they're going to stay out there for a bit and they're not close enough to be spooked by the click of the trigger and the firing pin, then just take a practice shot. Kind of get that initial. If you feel like you're going to flinch because you're so amped up and excited, I bet you'll flinch on that practice shot, and I think that'll help get it out of your system. So then when it comes time for the real deal, you'll be ready.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, Randall, you referenced the idea of, or that you took Hunter Ed. Awesome. But a part of Hunter Ed is also the section on ethics, right? And ethics comes down to making a shot that you can be confident will result in a quick, humane harvest. And so, and that those ethics can be on a continuum, right? Like if you're a brand new hunter and and you don't feel like you can confidently take a shot that's not broadside, then that's not the ethical decision for you in that moment. As you gain more experience and that becomes more of a reality, then that spectrum changes and that can be an ethical, action on your behalf, then great. So it's not all cut and dry. It moves as you get more. I mean, there's some ethical things that don't move, right? They're very concrete that you should not do. But as it relates to like actions you take and is a little bit based on your skill. So cool. Well, thanks, Randall, for sending in your question. I really appreciate it. I hope this is helpful. If you have follow-up questions, Randall, or we didn't quite answer something that you wanted answered, feel free to shoot me an email at the same address that you sent this message to, and I'll be glad to help you out. All right. If you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance that you're either thinking about hunting for the first time or trying to get better at it. Either way, you need to start with the right foundation. And that's why I'm so excited for the Evolving Hunter podcast to be partnering with CertifiedHunter.com. Certified Hunter offers state-approved online hunter education that's built for real people, not just test takers. You'll learn firearm safety, ethical decision-making, wildlife conservation, and what it actually means to be a responsible hunter in the field. And here's the part that matters most. This isn't about checking a box. It's about showing up prepared, confident, and safe when the season opens. I didn't grow up hunting. I started later in life, and I can tell you firsthand that having clear, practical training makes a huge difference. Certified Hunter helps shorten the learning curve and sets you up to do this the right way from day one. So, if you're ready to take your first step into hunting, or you know someone who is, head to CertifiedHunter.com/evolving hunter and get started today. Again, that's CertifiedHunter.com/evolving hunter, and let's start the right way. Next question is from a listener named Rebecca who lives in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Rebecca says, I really want to hunt public land, but I'll be honest, is really intimidating. I'm not just worried about finding game. I'm really worried about walking in on someone, ruining their hunt, parking in the wrong spot, or not understanding any of the unwritten rules that you've referenced in previous episodes. I know public land belongs to all of us, but it doesn't always feel that way when you're a new hunter. It can feel like everyone has um, already claimed the good spots and know what they're doing. What advice would you give to a new hunter trying to use public land respectfully? And how do you scout and go hunting without stepping on other people's toes? What should you do if you run into another hunter in the field? That's a great question, Rebecca. One that we've kind of addressed on the show before about hunting on public land, but I I know that it's never like a cut and dry. Here's the answer. So happy to keep talking about it. Brandon, what's your thoughts on that kind of thing?
I'd say there's a lot of grumpy people out there who think that they they're maybe on a bit of a high horse, and so yeah, you're not wrong that it can be intimidating. You don't know who you're going to run into, and you don't want to intentionally frustrate somebody because you walked in on them, and they might just have missed the shot on uh, a trophy animal that they've been chasing, and they're looking to blame it on somebody, and you're the unfortunate person to walk in on them. And it as easy it is for me to sit here and say, like, don't let that get to you, but don't let it get to you. Like, there's certain things, like, it's public land, it's there for all of us to use, and we can get into the so-called public land ethics and the unwritten rules, and I think those are important. But start with making sure you know your rules and regulations for your state. That's the easy black and white line to start with. What are the rules of walking out on public land? What's the type of um, shot if you're bird hunting? Do you need to be lead free or not? Is there certain areas, certain weapon types, all that stuff? Make sure you're all good with all of those rules, and then at least you know you're legal. And I feel like once you're confident in being legal, that takes away some of the stress of walking out onto public land. Because then when you see a game warden or conservation officer walk up to you, at least that stressfulness is gone, and now it can just be a friendly conversation. And and speaking of conservation officers, they're out there to help us. I work with plenty of them here in my office, and they're more than happy to help, especially new hunters out there who are coming to them before they do something wrong. Say, hey, I've got a couple questions. How do I do this ethically? How do I do this right and legally? And I can always guarantee you you're going to find some quality help by reaching out to your local game wardens and conservation officers. And then after that, it's be respectful, I guess. If you can be respectful, I think most people are going to recognize that. My wife and I were out turkey hunting last week, and we were set up on some turkeys. The turkeys were on private, and we're hoping they'd jump the road and come to public for us. And we saw this truck up on the road. He slams on the brakes, puts it in reverse. You can tell he's looking at these, what I assume are a couple toms strutting, and then he whips over into a parking spot and he starts climbing down onto the public to set up on them, hoping they jump over. And I eventually get his attention, and he waves, says he's sorry, and off he goes. And that we didn't get those birds. Those birds never came over to us, but that was public land. He was, he walked in on us, so to speak, but I tried to not be rude to him. I just let him know that we're there, and he was more than happy to leave since we were there first. And so that's kind of, if you see signs of somebody being there, somebody's parking in the parking lot, and it's very obvious, like, okay, they're probably hunting in the area that I was intending on hunting. Uh, you have full right to park right next to them and walk on in. But depending on the situation, sometimes it's best just to kind of go down to the next option, just because you'd hope somebody would do that for you if you were there first.
That's great advice. Particularly when it comes down to being a new hunter on public land, the thing that comes to my mind, obviously, first, yes, there's there's the being respectful, being kind, and things like that. But the other part is not that there's never like not that there's not an emphasis on safety hunting on private land. There absolutely is, but there's a really large emphasis on safety when you're hunting on public land, just because you don't know who else may be out there in the moment, right? And they're out there listening for movement and sounds, and those people may not be making great. You don't know the other people out there, right? So, making sure. Obviously, Rebecca, I'm assuming you're a newer hunter. You referenced that in your question, but review safe hunting procedures when you're moving through before you go and move through public land, right? Like, don't carry decoys on your back if you're using a decoy of any kind, right? Make sure you're wearing your hunter orange, right? Like, be visible to other hunters, etc. And then on the other side, making sure that you may be set up and hunting, and there may be other people moving through the woods around you, right? So identifying your target and what lies beyond it, all of those things I mean, are just critically important when you're on private and public, but they oftentimes come more into play when you're on public land because there's just a lot more people out there. So that's a really big piece that should be at the very top of your things I need to make sure I have on lockdown before you move into public land for sure. And I think Brandon hit the nail on the head. I'm not going to repeat anything he said, but the other piece of advice I would say is I think, Rebecca, you're going to figure it out, and you're going to really get comfortable hunting on the public land around you, and that's awesome. I encourage you to remember what it feels like right now, right? And when you see new hunters coming into the public land that you've been hunting forever, have some grace, have some kindness toward them, right? And help them as they're kind of getting their journey started on public land for sure. I think that's as Brandon, as you said, there can be some real curmudgeon-y people that you run into on public land sometimes because they forgot, right, how it felt when they were just starting, in public, hunting on public land. So maintain that grace and that feeling of what it feels like now, because ultimately it helps the entire hunting community or your hunting community, because you're probably hunting next to your neighbors and things like that, right? People that live in your town, most likely. So cool.
Another thing I was thinking of to peace of mind of, I know for me, even when I go to new spots, I've hunted here in South Dakota for the last 5 by 6 years, and there's still new spots I go to. I'm like, can I park here? Is this where I'm supposed to go? And
Yeah,
just because they drove in on a section line, or there's kind of weird ways to access certain things, go to your local game and fish office or call them and be like, what do your signs look like that give people or permission, or shows that it's a designated parking area? And then if you see that sign out in the wild, so to speak, you can have some confidence of like, all right, at least I know I'm starting in a okay spot to park. And then, but don't don't only go to those spots, because that's where a lot of people are going to go to. So then also ask the question of, all right, you know, what's it look like to park off the road somewhere? Like, what do I look for to make sure I can legally park there? And like, ask some of those questions, because if you have confidence that you can park there, for me, I don't know, it just kind of leaves s- peace of mind that like, I'm parked, I'm good. Now I can just focus on the hunt. But just go ask those questions. What do the signs look like? What's a good example of off the road parking look like? Can I pull off on this type of highway, or does it can only be county roads and Forest Service roads I can park off of? Ask some of those basic level questions, and I bet the folks at your local game and fish office will be happy to walk you through that.
absolutely. There is a lot to say in having confidence that you're at least in the right place, right? Particularly when it's all brand new to you. And there's in addition to parking, there's lots of resources out there now that are like hunting GPS kind of apps that show the public land, to show where you are on the public land, to confirm that you haven't crossed, some invisible barrier, that you're now on someone's private land, you're doing something bad. So you can look into those. I think that's extremely helpful too. I mean, that kind of stuff has like changed the game for sure in knowing where you're at and feeling confident that you're doing the right thing. Um, so cool. Well, Rebecca, I hope that is helpful. Again, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to shoot me a message. Happy to have that conversation. further. Our last question comes from a listener named Tyler in Brookings, South Dakota. I tried my best, Brandon, to pick some South Dakota folks since you're in that neck of the woods. But Tyler is asking about gear, which is a great topic to talk about. Tyler said, I'm trying to get into hunting, but every time I look online, it seems like I need $4,000 worth of gear before I can even step into the woods. Packs and optics and boots and calls and rangefinders and scent control and camo and coolers and blinds. It's a lot. I'm willing to invest in good equipment over time, but I don't want to mistake buying gear. Um, for learning how to hunt. At the same time, I don't want to cheap out on things that actually matter. So, for a brand new hunter, what gear is really essential? What can wait? And where should I spend a little more money up front? Man, that's a big question, Tyler. And also it really matters where you live, right? Good thing we know that you're in South Dakota, and good thing we have a South Dakota hunting expert on our show today. Brandon, what do you think? What are the things that should really matter for a new hunter and making those purchasing decisions?
Yeah, well, first off, Tyler, I'm thankful for your question. I think just you asking the question already tells me that you're on the right track of not going down the gear junkie rabbit hole. I love gear. I love nerding out over what are the fine details that I could improve upon to make myself either more comfortable or more efficient out in the field. And those small, minute details can get expensive real fast. So it's a good place to be asking this question up front. I got a two-part answer. In South Dakota, we're pretty unique in the types of hunts you could find yourself on. You can go on a backcountry type of hunt if you wish, either out in the Black Hills or even just in some of our remote part of the states where you are camping and hiking around and whatnot. Or out east, and even where I live in central part of the state, there's tree stand hunting where you could you're not really walking a whole lot. Gear, I think no matter what you're doing, spend money on boots. Protect your feet, care for your feet. If your feet hurt and they're full of blisters or cold, your hunt is over, or you're going to be miserable during your hunt. So whether you're sitting in tree stand or you're walking West River for mule deer or hiking the Black Hills, you want quality boots. Now buy boots that will be appropriate for what you're planning on doing and when you're hunting, but I'd say if you're going to spend money on boots. The next one is if you're hunting West River and you're planning to do a lot of hiking around, spot and stalking, you know you're going to have to pack that deer out and you're not going to be able to drag it out or drive up to it. Quality pack. They just bite the bullet, cry once type of mentality and just buy it. That it just saves your back, is way more comfortable, allows you to haul more meat out. But if you're tree stand hunting on private land and you can drive up to it, a Walmart fanny pack will work, or the pockets on your coat will work to hold the limited gear that you need. You can generally, with clothing, the more you spend, the lighter the gear will become, but still maintain its warmth. So you'll kind of have to balance your budget within that. But if you're just looking to dabble in an East River deer season, you don't need to go buy a $2,000 Sitka outfit or some of the other higher end brands. Like you can go to your local sporting goods store and find some warm stuff. Um, in terms of your firearm or bow, uh, we just had a a meeting, a regional meeting within our department. As like 2 weeks ago, we invited some of the local precision gun manufacturers in the state to the new range. We have a big new shooting range in Rapid City, and we all got to go shoot out there. And these guys were bringing like a $10,000 22 long rifle and like an over $10,000 center fire 6.5 Creedmoor to teach some long range shooting. And like these setups are sweet. Don't get me wrong. Like everybody that shot the 1,000 yards, we all hit it, and it was super fun. But then I've done the same thing with my setup, which is like a tenth of the cost. And then I bet you could do the same thing with kind of an off the shelf budget rifle too. So I don't you can get a quality, whatever you view as quality for like a rifle and stuff, but you don't need to go spend 2 months worth of a paycheck just to go start hunting. You can start with budget, work on, spend more money on skills and knowledge before you start spending it on the excess of buying high end gear. I will say, if you're trying to hunt later in the year, spending money on warmer clothes, obviously, if anything with that type of comfort, if you're cold and miserable or wet, that's going to not only could be a dangerous depending where you're at, but then also could be you just won't sit out there and you'll quit hunting early that day because you're too cold.
Think a lot of this, I fully understand the notion of starting something new, wanting to have something that's going to serve you long term, being excited about getting into hunting, and okay, I'm going to put some money down to get myself set up to get this rock and rolling. I am a man that has too many hobbies, so I fully understand that, like, that notion of like one, like, okay, I'm in it, I'm going to do this. But the particularly in this space and getting into hunting, there's a lot of trial and error as it relates to like your equipment and how your setup is. I've talked on this show before. The whole first part of my career was in outdoor education and guiding big long expeditions, in the Grand Canyon and across big mountain ranges and things like that. And like, I had my stuff down to a science as it relates to like how my pack is organized. Everything has its spot and a spot for everything, because it really mattered to me to be really, really efficient when I'm operating in the field, because I'm in charge of keeping other people alive. I need keeping me alive to be as straightforward and like dialed in as possible. But it took me like 15 years, honestly, of like figuring out how I like to travel in the backcountry and keep my stuff like positioned and organized and how I want to carry it and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying it's going to take you 15 years to figure it out when you're hunting. It's a little bit not quite apples to apples there. But trial and error is completely okay. And I really try to like harp on the fact that yes, hunting takes some upfront investment if you're starting at zero, right, to get started. But it, as you reference, Brandon, it does not have to be this huge sum of money. You can do it in a discount way, and some of it will be trial and error. Right there, you may try some gear, may not be exactly what you want, but it's what you got for right now, and you can slowly kind of find where your pain points are, and then that's where you can start to maybe put some money to solve those problems. Right. But I do think you're spot on with boots and pack, right? Because those are things that get overlooked a lot. The focus, a lot of new hunters, is on firearm, right? Like, how much do I need to spend on that bow or that firearm to get started? And by all means, extremely important. Some people, I mean, they lose their minds over caliber and that kind of stuff. I get that. I'm not that kind of guy. I've had the same 30-06 forever, and it works for me and where I live, and I'm happy with it. But um, I think I paid. It's like a Savage 30-06. I think I paid $450 for it, or $500 maybe. And great, I love it. But neither here nor there. But people often forget about the shoes, that part, and other things like that. There's a few like suggestions if I can make to you when you're looking at shoes in particular, boots in particular. Oftentimes you look at boots, they're going to be leather A lot of times you see some synthetic boots out there now and again, but generally your more quality boots are going to be leather. And then leather comes in two different types. You can get bonded leather or like the full grain leather. Uh, the price difference between bonded and full grain is a little is a big difference, but full grain is going to be way more waterproof, typically warmer, and so that's worth the investment. And in a pack, you're looking at like we talk about packs, you're thinking about like the JanSport backpack, right? Not necessarily. It's much more about having a framed pack, something with some sort of rigidity in it that provides support and has a hip belt that goes around your hip. Because when you wear a pack appropriately, the frame puts the weight on your hips and not on your shoulders. If you have something you're carrying out an animal, or even if you're going out for a longer trip and you got a lot of gear, if you have like the weight on your shoulders, it's going to wear you into the ground, right? Pretty quickly. But if you can put that weight on your hips with a hip belt, then that is going to help you immensely over long term. So something with a frame in it, with a hip belt that like actually padded, not just like a nylon strap that goes around your waist. That's not what I'm talking about. Um, if you go into a store and look at people that places that sell packs like that, they will be glad to help get you fitted because they are somewhat fitted, right, based on your torso length. And you can try on a bunch of different kinds, and most stores even have like a 40-pound bag of sand that you can put in it and put it uh, uh, on your waist and can help you there. So hope that answers that. That's a really big question, Tyler, from Brookings, South
Yeah,
Dakota.
I've got a different perspective thinking back on all the years that I've been a hunter. If I could go back and tell myself what things I should have bought first compared to other things that I've hyper fixated on, oh, check out these pants or whatever it was, it'd be boots. That would still stay at the top of my list. Always make sure you have quality boots. I should have bought the pack that I have now. I love, and I should have bought that to start off with, and then glass. So binoculars, I'd say just start with a good quality pair of binoculars, but quality glass that you can carry that with you for years and years and years. And that is usually something that I hear just talking to friends and coworkers and colleagues that they're like, oh, I need something a little nicer. My eyes get tired behind these cheaper binoculars. So you're almost saving money in the long run by just buying what your budget allows right away. And then if you are going to be hunting in colder weather, I would say clothing jumps up the list a little bit higher. But if you're primarily hunting warmer stuff, Walmart grade camo works just fine. I know plenty of people back home in Wisconsin that have killed big whitetail from tree stands in blue jeans. So I don't overthink it. So if you're hunting warm weather stuff and you're not too terribly worried about getting cold, clothing even comes down the list a little further. So
Yeah.
that's probably the order I would go back and tell younger Brandon to focus on.
And that again, we reference like where you live matters. Like if you lived in where I live in South Carolina, glass is not even on the list really. Like for your scope maybe, but like we don't. I never carry binos in South Carolina because I can't see more than 100 yards anyways. Um, because it's just really really thick vegetation. We don't have a lot of big open areas, so it all depends on where you live, on kind of where that falls into the spectrum. But cool. Well, thanks Tyler for sending that question. If you have a question, if you're sitting here listening, like, I've got a good question for the Evolving Hunter podcast, you are heavily encouraged. Please send it in to me at community, that's COMMUNITY, at evolvinghunter.com. Again, community at evolvinghunter.com. I love to get your questions. I love to read them. Again, it helps me kind of structure the show. So feel free to send me anything you'd like. And even if I don't get to it necessarily on the show, because I can only do a few per episode, I do my best to respond to you via email just to be helpful. We are going, because I have so many questions now kind of built up, we are going to do a questions and answers only episode in the coming days. I don't have an exact timeline on when that's going to be out, but We are going to do one of those episodes. We're going to have a guest return that's been on the podcast previously, and we're going to dive into questions for the entire episode and try to get those out there. Cool. All right. Those were big questions. I feel like there's a lot of ways that that can go. Um, I want to jump into having a chat with you, Brandon, about kind of your background in hunting, and kind of frame this a bit more, and what you're doing in South Dakota. So we can kind of jump straight in. I know we're already like 38 minutes into this show. I'm just not really getting to introductions, but I want to kind of open the floor for you to kind of provide your introduction, who you are, what you do, and yeah, and I don't want to put too many parameters on it. So, uh,
Sounds good. Yeah, well, Brandon, I run the hunter education program here in South Dakota. Locally within the state, we call it the Hunt Safe program. So it's the Hunter Safety and Firearm Education program, and that's the class you'd take to go get your hunter education card. This was not my dream as a kid, I guess you could say. I didn't even know this job existed as a kid to even have it be a dream. I actually grew up in Wisconsin, went to school to be a fisheries biologist, and ended up even going to get my master's in fisheries biology from Iowa State. And through that whole process, I was still thinking I'm gonna go be a biologist. And then, yeah, it just things changed, circumstances changed, and I knew I was supposed to leave fisheries, and this job had an opening, and here I am. It was because of my connections through previous jobs here in South Dakota that led me to be able to at least get an interview and land the job. But growing up in Wisconsin, very different hunting compared to here. When I first moved out here, I didn't even know South Dakota really was. I didn't know where it was on the map hardly growing up. And then nonetheless where Pierre was. I live right smack dab middle of the state. We're on the line between what we call East and West River. Different There's a lot of different connotations that go along with East and West River, but we've got mule deer, antelope, Western style spot and stock, but then we've also got timbered areas where you can go put up a tree stand if you want. But driving out here, I was like, how do you hunt? I was used to some 1,000 acres of private land in the driftless area of southwest Wisconsin, where we had like 90 tree stands already set up. And as a kid, that was awesome. Like my dad would just be like, "Have fun, go hunt," and I just go find a tree, sit my butt down, and see what walk by. Moving out here, it was a big shock to the system to figure out how do I take what I learned from the hardwoods of Wisconsin to the open prairie of South Dakota. But it's been a ton of fun. I grew up archery hunting for deer and gun hunting. Our version of pheasant hunting back home was spinning some pheasants around in a circle till they're dizzy and shoving them in some grass. And then an hour later, we'd take my buddy's dog and he'd just follow our boot tracks to each location that we stuffed a bird in. And then we'd kick around and kick the bird up and shoot it. And I'd be like, yeah, pheasant hunting's awesome. Yeah, I still love pheasant hunting, but we put in a lot more steps to find birds than what we used to. Uh, but yeah, it's always been a passion for me. It's my way of getting away from the busyness, stress of life, connect with the Lord, get fresh air, put meat on the table, all of that sort of stuff. It all wraps up into my love for the outdoors. And then being able to have this job allows me to share that with others. It's very frequent that I'm around new hunters. I've helped folks go from being nervous to hold a shotgun to then watching them shoot their first bird later in the fall, first pheasant. And so just that reward of getting to see not just the skills of hunting to be forming with these new hunters, but also that confidence that can be carried into other aspects of life. And I think that is probably the most rewarding part of the job.
so could you share a bit about like your how you got into hunting, your early days of hunting?
Yeah, my it's kind of the typical story of my dad hunted, so I hunted. My dad and grandpa and grandparents, they all hunted. So it was a family. That was how my dad and I hung out. Really, we'd just go bow hunting and rifle hunting all fall, and that just kind of what drew me into it. And then I had a lot of buddies, so we'd start rabbit hunting after deer hunting was over with, and we'd do that throughout high school. And yeah, it was really just was brought up in a mentorship that taught me everything I need to know. Which, if you're sitting here listening and you're like, I didn't have that, how am I supposed to get to a level of confidence to go out and do it on my own? I hear you because thinking back on all the lessons I've learned to get me to the point where I'm at now, that's a ton. You can't just start with one season and be like, all right, I've got it figured out. And I say that with confidence because I'm still learning stuff. I still learn, oh, if I would have, thought about the terrain differently and deer movements differently, I could have probably figured this location out. Or 2 falls ago, I went out elk hunting for the first time, and that was in Wyoming. In Wyoming, you can draw the tag and it's a rifle tag. You can get a archery endorsement, so then you can go archery hunting with the same tag. And then if you don't feel archery, you can go back with a rifle. That's great. Everybody that came with me archery hunting wasn't able to come with me rifle hunting. So I ended up in the mountains by myself, solo elk hunt, brand new elk hunter. And so there I was, kind of in the shoes of a beginner. Yeah, I'm comfortable with the firearm. I'm comfortable with hiking. I've packed deer out on my back. I'm comfortable with game processing. But elk movement? No, I had no idea what I was doing. I was so humbled that trip. I did not fill my tag. My The hunter ed program would have been proud of me. I did not pull the trigger on a cow's. I had the crosshairs on a cow's head, and I would have to shoot through a little bit of brush and shoot skylined. And I'm like, nope, I'm not gonna pull that trigger. And I went home with no meat, but the joys of stumbling through the learning curve was so much more worth it than had I filled with my archery tag earlier that season. And so I feel you that I'm still learning how to be a hunter. There's so much to learn, and I'll learn till the end of my hunting career. But yeah, it always ultimately started with just starting with family. And I have a picture somewhere. I misplaced it, but it was my first time out hunting with my dad and my grandparents. I'm this little orange blob that could barely walk in the snow prints of my dad in front of me because the snow was probably only like shin deep for him, but it was like waist deep for me. And there I was, 5 years old, just tromping through the snow, and then he'd take me out bow hunting, and before I could legally hunt, I'd start just sitting in a tree stand with no bow or nothing, and I would watch deer walk by, and my dad would be just across the food plot. He could still see me and was relatively close, and I just report on what I saw. And I love that aspect of it, of my drive to hunt didn't come from, I want a trophy room like my dad. My drive to hunt started with, I love it out here. I love watching deer. I love watching the birds. I love when a squirrel would run up the tree beside me, and then all of a sudden I'd move quick and you'd see its eyes about pop out of its head because the tree moved, and it would, run down the tree. And it just all the little stories like that gave me a much better perspective of hunting rather than just the harvest.
I'm always interested in folks who grew up hunting 'cause I didn't have that experience. Um, but the idea of, okay, so when you first start hunting, you're hunting with your a mentor, family member, father, grandfather, whatever the case it is, for people that grow up hunting. Like where it it's almost like it's their thing that they're taking you to do, right? But then at a certain point, there becomes like a crossroads where it becomes your thing that you decide to do. And so I'm always curious, was there a specific hunt or a moment that made you think, or do you remember it even like this is gonna be a part of who I am, right? As a hunter.
Not necessarily. I am a hunter from my core, from my own choice. I don't remember there. I just kind of always was. Even my dad would say taking me out fishing on the boat when I was a toddler. It should have been difficult. I guess it wasn't. I don't really remember those days, but I guess it wasn't. It was just I loved it from day one. However, there is a point. I don't. Sometime in high school, I started dabbling in going out to the land that we had permission on by myself, and I finally killed a deer, a doe, by myself without my dad there. And then I called a buddy of mine to come help me drag her out. And then normally the tradition was my grandparents lived in the same town as us. We cleaned deer at their place. And in those days and in Wisconsin, you had to drag the whole deer out and you had to go check it in person at a check station, even during archery season. And so I did all that. I was comfortable with that. Get to my grandparents' house, like, hey, I got a deer, called them up ahead of time. Normally they're like, great, we'll get the knives out, the table ready. And my buddy and I showed up and they're like, all right, here's some supplies. Good luck. And so then I kind of was standing there at the door, dumbfounded of, I have to do this now? Yeah. And so then we took it to my buddy's house and he had a shed that we could clean it in. And that was the first time that I had ever cleaned like the whole carcass down and packaged it ready for the freezer without a mentor there, my grandparents or my dad. And I think that was a defining moment of like, I got this.
Yeah,
I don't know everything, but I know enough to venture on this journey by myself.
that's awesome. That's just some experiential learning right there,
Hmm.
learn by doing. I love it.
Yep.
That's really cool. Um, one of the things, like, I haven't spent a ton of time in South Dakota, but I've obviously worked in hunter ed, kinda the national stage a little bit and spent a lot of time working with other agencies, and South Dakota seems to have a really strong hunting culture. Uh, so, what do you think makes hunting in South Dakota that unique compared to other places?
Yeah, I think I don't know the exact statistics, but we are we may not be number one, but we're up there and the top of the list of hunters per capita within the state. Part of that is it helps that we don't have a ton of people, so it's easier to get those those stats up. But then two, we don't have these a ton of big metropolitan areas. We have Rapid City, Sioux Falls, Aberdeen, some of the bigger towns, Pierre. But even like once you get outside of Rapid City and Sioux Falls, it's so easy to get out of town that the influence of ranch life, farm life, out of town living flow into town very easily. And so I think there's an understanding of like it's just part of the culture here of well, let me back up a little bit. Living here in Pierre, when I meet somebody that doesn't hunt or fish, I'm like, let's talk. What do you do? we're we're 30 minutes north of I-90. Like there's not a ton here to occupy somebody for long term, at least in my opinion, because I love being outside. So I'm like, what else is there to do here? We have the river to fish and there's tons of public land to hunt. And so I think it's just ease of access, public land, the size of our communities. And then on top of that too is small game hunting. So we consider pheasant small game and so and grouse. And that we could call it the burden of entry into small game hunting is so much less.
Yeah.
And to have such an abundance of pheasants to go chase in the fall, it is a much lesser barrier for a new hunter to dabble in. And so you can just really you could borrow a shotgun, go get a pair of boots, tighten them up, and a vest helps, but it's not necessary. Throw on an orange hat and start walking. You don't need a dog. All the other things are just helpful things. But as long as you have boots, vest, and a gun, and even that's a little excessive. As long as you have a gun and a license, you can go pheasant hunting.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, last time I was in South Dakota was for a meeting. It was in Sioux Falls, and I think it was, like, February, and it was freezing cold, and we were staying. I don't know where. I don't know if you were at this meeting. I think it was like a Midwest AFWA meeting, but um, it was freezing cold and like 4 o'clock in the morning in the hotel. Everyone was staying at. The fire alarm went off, and
No.
which as it happens sometimes in the hotels. And so I woke up, went in the hallway, and the hallway was filled with smoke. It's like, "Okay, this is real.
It's real. Yeah.
We've got to get out." And luckily, like, I threw on a jacket and stuff like that and went outside. And I went outside, and there were folks, like, literally in pajamas standing outside in the snow at 4 o'clock in the morning in February in Sioux Falls. And, so, of course, like, the fire department came, and they had to go do searches. Someone had lit, like, a trash can on fire. And so, like, there was that whole deal. We were out there for, like, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it is a wonder that no one, like, died standing out there. Thankfully and I flew there, so I didn't have a car. Thankfully, I knew someone who had a truck in the parking lot, and we went and sat in that truck with the heat on, but, man, was absolutely burnt. Nothing to do with hunting, just that's my memories of being last time being in South Dakota. Man, I've never been so cold. Oh, jeepers. I don't know how people survive
Yeah,
that.
I mean, the funny saying is always, "Well, if it wasn't for the wind, it'd be pretty nice out."
It
Yeah, and
wasn't for the wind. Yeah.
yeah, that wind does get a little chilly, but get used to it.
So, this is not a good segue. This is a hard segue here, but the, having grown up hunting and now, you're hunting is a part of your professional career and helping new hunters through hunter education and other programs, um, having this long, uh, tenure as a hunter, and how has your views of hunting perhaps changed, um over time as you've gone from, a very young novice hunter to now working in the industry and helping others, what and even I think you're a new dad too, right?
Mhm.
So
Yep.
how have your views changed over that continuum?
Yeah, I mean, my love for being out in the woods or on the prairie here in South Dakota hasn't really changed. Like, the days when I can finally step away, especially as with having a little one at home, it's harder to get out by myself than what it used to be. I still enjoy that the quietness, just everything kind of settles down. But, growing up, it used to be, we were very, we called it quality deer management. So we had very strict regulations on what we could or couldn't shoot because we're trying to grow bigger deer. And so I was kind of in this little bubble of not being able to explore what I want to chase and pursue because I was in this confinement of we need to hunt or we need to only harvest old mature deer and that one's not big enough, but that one is. And like as a young hunter, I was like, oh gosh, am I going to get in trouble from landowner if I shoot the wrong deer? So then when I moved to college and then I started hunting public land, I was like, I can do what I want. And so that was like a newfound who am I as a hunter? And that love of being out there always stayed with me. But now I got this freedom of if something excites me, if I see a buck coming in that excites me, take a shot. And nobody's there to yell at me. Not that I ever got yelled at, but as a 12-year-old, yes, sir, I won't shoot that deer,
Yeah, yeah,
And now as I've gotten further removed from my family back home of relying upon them, it's this pressure that I never felt growing up of, well, shoot, I got to put some meat in the freezer. We primarily eat venison, and that's just kind of our choice. And usually I've killed enough deer to then supply our freezers for the next year. But that's kind of like a different perspective into hunting that I didn't have growing up. Growing up in Wisconsin, we could shoot as many doe really as we wanted, and it was relatively easy between my dad and I. And so it was never really a thought. But now that I'm on my own, so to speak, that was a new perspective of like, all right, this tag that I have isn't to wait for that next trophy. It was that definition of trophy was changing to it has 4 legs and looks like a healthy deer and it's going to feed my family. And then the perspective is of like, you make that harvest and it's like, oh, this is awesome. I got meat for the next year. I'm grateful for that. And now as my daughter just turned 1, so I'm starting to think like, how do I involve her out with me? And she may or may not choose to be a lifelong hunter. I can't force that upon her. But what I can do is I can make our time out in the field together memorable, fun, exciting, things that she looks forward to doing. And she's been with me last fall, even when she was like 4 or 5, 6 months old. Grouse hunting. I've killed a couple limits of grouse with her on my back. Just put some earphones on her and off we go. And now my perception of taking her out as she gets older, or introducing my wife to turkey hunting that I was doing this season and the past few seasons, it's I have so much more excitement to watch somebody pull the trigger on their first harvest than it is for me to shoot another deer to put meat in the freezer. And yeah, it's the perspective has changed definitely, of just being grateful to be out there and loving seeing somebody else fuel that fire and gain that confidence to go do it on their own.
Yeah. Becoming a dad is a really good way to change your perspectives on a lot of things, isn't it?
Oh, big time.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like most times we talk, we usually spend some time because I'm not gonna say new. I have a 3-year-old, but um, daughter as well, and it can really change up your perspectives, and it's hard not to let it bleed into the things that you do for work, right? And like your thoughts on conservation, your thoughts on the future of things, and it's hard not to let it kind of creep in on you.
Yeah, one thing that I think a lot about, the one of our the first the what one was it? The third question we answered at the start of the show
Hmm.
about gear.
Yeah,
I think about gear all the time, but now it's been fixated on what rifle does my daughter need? And my wife is always like, she's 1. She doesn't need one yet. But my thought process is, my dad, when I was growing up, was, here's a 30-06 with a plastic butt plate. I'm not even going to call it a pad. There's no padding to it. Go hunt. There was no like, I took hunter ed, obviously, but I didn't get to go to the range on a regular basis to learn, proper uh, trigger technique, proper form, all that. He's like, yep, you know how to pull the trigger. Let's go hunt. That thing about broke your teeth every time you shot it.
yeah,
Like, it was not designed for a little kid and recoil management. It was designed to, you definitely got that respect factor that some of my instructors want to talk about with having kids shoot firearms. Like, they want to have the respect of the firearm. Well, I got that from that gun, but I also developed some nasty flinches and bad habits of shooting because of the punishment it put on my shoulder. So now I'm thinking with my daughter, as she gets older, like, what can I do to make everything we do in the outdoors, everything that I can control, enjoyable? Start her off on a pellet gun, move her to a 22 long rifle, then maybe a 223 Remington. And then
hmm
when we get up to center fire, make sure the ergonomics are such that the stock fits her. And then, I have a suppressor. And so to help reduce the scare factor of that boom, I'd argue that most new hunters or new shooters struggle with the noise more than the recoil. And yeah, so it's like all these things that I didn't think about 3 years ago. I just thought, what does Brandon want? But now I'm like, "Well, how can I make sure that my daughter has positive experience? And then when she gets old enough to make that decision, yes, I want to continue. It's not because of something, if she decides not to do it, it's not because of something I did that made her not like it."
yeah, for sure. I think when I learned the news of we had some like change in regulations or you know, politics, I don't know what you'd call it, on suppressors recently, right? Like my first thought was like, man, that is awesome for kids and new hunters in general, but for kids, like I'm stoked that that is you know, a little more available for to because I think it's a great idea we use with kids for sure because that sound is a big deal, particularly as they move up into centerfire rifles and they got some bigger booms to them. Having that option is awesome. So If you were a if our listener living in South Dakota was brand new, just they had an interest in hunting or interest in being a part of their own kind of food process and securing protein for their family, could you kind of walk us through, like step by step, how they can in South Dakota get involved in hunting?
Yeah, I'd go back to starting with small game. It's the smallest barrier to entry. You can I Because hunting is so popular in the state, I bet you know somebody that has a shotgun. And generally, in my opinion, people are probably more willing to lend out shotguns than they are rifles. And shotguns are a little more universal fitting, anyways. But if you just want to go dabble in it, get a pair of hikers. You probably should own a general pair of hiking boots, anyways. Throw on a jacket. You can go get a cheap orange vest from your local sporting goods store. Borrow a shotgun. You don't even have to drop money on that yet. And go for a walk. Make sure you have your license. And then just go for a walk. And find somebody at work that maybe you want to tag along with. And I think that would be a fantastic way to get started. If there's definitely a growing interest or deer are part of your interest, if you've never held a license in South Dakota or haven't held one within the past 10 years for a deer, you can get what's called an apprentice tag. So it's a cheap tag. I think it's like $5, and you can hunt the whole youth season, which in South Dakota is the whole fall. It's like, I don't remember the dates off the top of my head, but like mid-September sometime through the end of the year. And you can go out with a rifle. And that apprentice tag is designed to give you as a new hunter the opportunity to go harvest a doe with them with basically no pressure, especially if you do it before, like early in the year when the weather's nice, the deer herds haven't been pushed around a bunch, our gun seasons haven't happened. You can go out and hunt unpressured deer on public land and put some meat in the freezer for relatively, well, cheap price because the tags are so cheap, and really decide if that's something you want to do or not. And that's only valid for a one-time use. The next year you'd have to go get other tags.
And you have to hunt with a with someone, a licensed hunter, correct?
Not the apprentice tag,
Oh, really? Okay.
because it's
Well,
only for yeah, it's only for adults. So then if you have a kid that wants to kind of dip their toes into hunting, we have the mentor hunting program,
got ya.
and that's where you can get a child a doe tag, and then there's some other regulations around that, such as uh, another mentor has to be within arm's reach of them, only one firearm between the two of them. So like when my daughter gets old enough, maybe the first tag we get will be that doe mentor tag. I can't also be carrying my bow or my rifle to try to fill my own tag. I'm just solely focused on being with her. And yeah, so there's we have the option for the adults with the apprentice tag, and then the option for the kids with the mentor tag.
That's great. So, for hunter ed in South Dakota, what's that process look like? What are their options?
So you have to at least be 11 to take the class and get certified. But you can do right now. We have a couple different options. If you're 11 or 12, really anything, any age under 16, anybody can go to our traditional in-person class, and that's where there's usually a law enforcement officer is involved. Volunteer instructors are there. Sometimes our education staff are there, and they walk you through everything. You can show up with nothing other than your weather appropriate clothing, and by the time you walk out of that course, you are certified, provided that you pass the exam. But there's a couple classroom days, and then ends usually with a hands-on field day. Uh, Depending on where you're at, sometimes it's a shoot a pellet gun indoors. That happens in Rapid City. Otherwise, usually it's at a shooting range, and you actually go pull the trigger on a live firing gun. Um, Another popular option is our blended course. So that's the student will take all of the classroom lessons. They'll take it through an online course, online, at home, at their own pace, and then they'll travel to a 1 day in-person field day, which is the hands-on, actually get some firearms in the students' hands to learn how to load, unload, all that. And then if anybody's wanting their hunter education certificate and they're 16 years or older, they can get fully certified online with no field day component. So we've got options here. But yeah, if you're an adult and you know you can get fully certified online, but you don't want to, you'd rather have an instructor walk you through these skills, you're more than welcome to come to a traditional class.
So hunter education is a we've talked about on the show before, is a pretty heavily regulated. Really, it's the safety components of hunting, right? And like how to appropriately handle a firearm, how to make some appropriate decisions in the field. But and there's some shot placement and you know um, how to deal with hypothermia, like some stuff like that involved in hunter ed. But we've referenced frequently that hunter ed does not necessarily make you a hunter. There's a lot of skills that you need to learn in order to begin to gain that confidence to actually kind of make that transition from interested in hunting to hunter. So once someone finishes hunter education in South Dakota, what other options are available to them to continue to learn more about hunting?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I try to emphasize this point with our volunteer instructors a lot of our students, they're not, if they don't have somebody in their life, a mentor, their hunter ed does not prepare them to be a hunter. And that's not the goal of it. The goal of hunter ed is primarily firearm safety. We want you to be safe first, and then you can go learn hunting skills later. And so there's a couple, the easy options for those that live in Sioux Falls and Rapid City are the Hunting 101 programs. We've got Game Fish and Parks offices in both of those cities that they're called the Outdoor Campus, and they're GFP offices that are designed around education. So there's a lot of education staff there, and they both offer a Hunting 101 program. It's an application based program where you have to apply, and then once you're accepted in the program, they walk you through everything. That's where they actually sit you down and be like, all right, you already covered hunter ed, and they'll do some more firearm safety, but then it's how do you find the spot to hunt? Where's public land? Where do I sit on public land to actually hunt? Uh, Shot placement, go into more detail on that. Actually take some time at the range to gain some more firearms skills and accuracy skills. And then how do you butcher an animal? What do you do? Okay, I pulled the trigger. Now what? That's really intimidating.
Absolutely.
I remember the first time that actually my second deer, my dad said, first one's free, next one's on you. So, and he meant by field dressing it. And so then the next year, he's like, all right, you want me to do it? I'm like, nope, you said I got to do it. I was so nervous. I didn't know where to start. I don't know where to start cutting. And eventually he just said, just cut it open, rip everything out. And but because I had him sitting there to like break me out of the cloud of this is complicated and like help me walk me into the path of what it took for me to understand what to do, that you need somebody to do that. And so these hunting 101 programs handhold you through utilizing that apprentice tag. These are for adults, and they utilize that apprentice tag because it's a guaranteed antlerless tag, and it's a great option. But I'll admit too that it's scalability is hard,
Mhm.
and the department doesn't have enough funds to support a statewide mentor program that's has a bunch of state employees whose sole job is to take people hunting. Because that's at the campuses, there's people there that all fall. That's all they do. They just worry about taking people hunting, which sounds actually pretty great. It's a great fall. But we just don't have the funds to be able to do that. And so if you're not near Rapid City or Sioux Falls, start looking at some of your local hunting NGOs, the non-government organization chapters. Maybe a Pheasants Forever, Mule Deer Foundation. Maybe your local gun clubs do like little raffles or ways to support their associations and their clubs. Start showing up at some of those. And if you say, hey, I want to get into hunting, can you help me? Or do you know somebody that can? Just keep asking. You will find somebody that is going to be passionate about teaching you. And that's been, I think, one thing that's always kept me wanting to stay working in the hunting industry is, yeah, you always got bad apples everywhere, but in by and large, there's so many people that are excited to share their passion with others. And so I think if you start just showing up in those types of communities, it might feel awkward because you might not feel like you belong, but just keep showing up, keep trying to make some connections, and you'll find a local mentor to you to help you along.
Yeah, and I don't. I think it's important to point out, like I don't bring up the topic of hunter ed does not make a hunter because I'm trying to disparage hunter ed in any way. But it's important to think of hunter ed as like step one, right? But because it's the only like mandatory training that exists for hunters, it's often seen as, or maybe even portrayed as, like this is your hunting training, right? But there is a lot more to it. Hunter ed is incredibly effective at the safety component, which is, I think important to put that up front, top at the center for novice hunters to really gain those safety skills. If we look back historically on how hunting safety while hunting has changed over the years, particularly if we look at the pre-hunter ed days, and then as hunter ed got going, and then as it really spread across the country, and now that there's hunter ed programs in every state, um, it's clear as day that hunter ed makes a huge difference in hunter safety, because it gives them those safety skills. So not disparaging hunter ed in any way, because
No,
it's incredibly effective, but it is really important to know as a novice hunter, if you're walking out of hunter ed, regardless of the way you took it, whether it be online or in person or hybrid, whatever the case may be, and you're not walking out feeling like, man, I can go hunting by myself next weekend, there's nothing wrong with you, right? That, like, it's not like you missed something or your instructor was bad or whatever the case, right? That exists. Like, that is a thing. It's not necessarily there to build hunter confidence as it relates to skills. It's there to build skills specifically surrounding safety, with a few exceptions, obviously, and that hunter ed addresses. Even then, it's pretty safety adjacent. Ethics, responsibility, and safety is the things that hunter ed is really centered on. So, and I almost hate to repeat myself because we've talked about this a lot on the podcast. There are lots of options, whether it be through like as Brandon said, through your state agency that may have programs. Obviously, a single agency, meeting the needs of every single novice hunter. Whew, that's a big ask. That's a lot of coordination for that to happen. And so fortunately, there are a lot of NGOs that exist out there, that have programs to try to supplement, that there's additional training needs. And so there's, the biggest thing is just knowing that they exist, right? And going out and trying to find them, or trying to find a mentor, because that makes the biggest difference. You know, we look at national data relating to hunters who persist, as hunters, so they take hunter ed and they actually become hunters, and we find that there's a whole lot of people that kind of fall off. Right? They have the initial interest, they may take hunter ed, and then they just kind of spin their wheels and don't actually become hunters. So if you don't want that to be you, listener, right? Then it is critically important that you go out and find those additional resources. It's not just gonna come to you, right? You wake up, one morning, I'm like, okay, great, I know how to track a blood show now. That's not exactly how it works. Um, and even then, like looking at the data further, examining how what the deficiencies are that prevent that hunter from persisting, from taking hunter ed to becoming a hunter. They're largely education based, right? And so that is just a further illustration of the need to go out and find a mentor or training programs. Find your community, right, of people that can help you get started. Really quite important.
Yeah, take Hunter Ed with a friend,
Yeah.
and then go go on a walk on some public land with a friend. Like, do if you do everything with a friend, it just feels less lonesome, less intimidating because you got two brains to process through some of your decisions than just second guessing your own decision. And then two, then the hunting becomes the community. Like, wow, we didn't see any deer, we didn't see any pheasants, but we sure had a good chat together. We sure had a good time together. That it keeps it positive. It's so easy. And hunting is a lot of times that type two fun where it can be miserable in the moment, and then afterwards you get home, take a shower, you get all warm again, and you're like, boy, I can't wait to go do that again. But in the moment, you're like, man, this is miserable. And if you can be miserable with people, with some close friends, that it just makes everything so much better.
Yeah, fellowship can definitely help type 3 fun, which was it wasn't fun when it was happening, and it never will be fun. It can help it become the type 2 fun, where may not so much enjoyable in the moment, but man, a week later, we had a good time. We were out there. We're getting it done.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, and that goes back to so many principles that we harp on this show about the idea of the importance of community. We're meant to be community people, uh, human beings, and so finding your group of people that you can share that with and learn from and share with, right? And teach others I think is what is the glue that really keeps a lot of people engaged and involved. And that's the reason why, like particularly the NGO side, why there's so many chapters of the National Wild Turkey Federation, or of Delta Waterfowl, or whatever the case may be, right? It's people wanting to build community in their areas, um, and they're quite effective in doing so. So, very much encourage you to, if you're in that spot of like, I took hunter ed, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here. Getting involved makes a huge difference. So yeah, there's my
Eh,
soapbox on that.
yeah, and finding a mentor, finding somebody that's done it before can be a really great sounding board for vetting your YouTube knowledge.
Oh man,
Because
yeah,
there's you can learn a ton on the internet,
hmm
quality stuff. There's a lot of good stuff out there. There's also a lot of stuff that's just gonna complicate it and make you confused. And I think having somebody to go to and be like, I heard this. What do you think? And especially if it's somebody that you know is a avid hunter, they can maybe bring it back to reality for you and help you reframe your thinking, or be like, yeah, that's great advice. Go for it.
yeah, and a lot of stuff is so location specific. It's difficult to kind of zero in on what's right. We actually had that as a listener question a couple weeks ago. Someone that was just down the rabbit hole of YouTube and Instagram and podcast and all that stuff. And it's like, how do you discern what is good and how to discern what is just like just not for me, or just incorrect in general? People are just saying wild things so they can get clicks and likes and engagement. Um, and so yeah, it's really difficult to navigate that, particularly when you don't have the frame of reference to like really even like discern right and wrong in that moment, right? Your experience level hasn't quite met that threshold to say, this is probably a whole bunch of bunk, like not good. And so yeah, it's that's why like the local person, the local group, the local knowledge is going to be your most effective means of figuring out what is good and what is maybe not, appropriate for your location, for your skill level even, right? All of those things come into play there. So finding ways to get involved or take classes with your state agency, that is that is the answer for so many questions. I made a joke a couple episodes ago that I just need to change this the change the name of this podcast to Reach Out to Your State Agency. That's the whole name of it. And we just get on and talk about reaching out to your state agency because there are so many resources available to novice hunters involving that. So cool. Well, Brandon, we are coming up on like an hour and a half of this podcast, and so I'm going to try to move it toward its end. So if you aren't sitting there forever having to listen to us, but thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Evolving Hunter podcast. I always appreciate your insight, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in a week or so in Arizona. It'd be cool to see you again.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for having me on. If anybody has questions, specifically if you're in South Dakota, uh, you can contact me. It's my email is on our website. If you just go to gfp.sd.gov, that is our state agency's website. You can find information, licensing information, regulations, all that stuff is on there. But if you're still stuck, you don't know what else to click on, you're getting lost in the website, you don't know what to do. If you click on, there's a bunch of tabs at the top. If you click on Hunt and then scroll down on your left-hand side, and there's Hunter Education. That is our Hunt Safe or Hunter Education webpage, and then my email is at the top of that page. Feel free to shoot me an email, and I can direct you specifically within South Dakota if I can answer the question, or I can get you to the right person that can connect you somehow. But yeah, I'm out in the outdoors all the time, dabbling in all sorts of activities here local to peer and beyond with hunting and fishing. And so I usually welcome some friendly conversation or just to hear a story of another hunter. So yeah, if you have questions, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email and we can connect.
That's great. And if you're listening to this podcast driving on the road and didn't quite catch that URL, I'll put it in the show notes so you can go back and click on it and access it from there. Thanks again, man. I really appreciate having you on. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who maybe is thinking about getting into hunting, or maybe someone that you want to start hunting with. I'd also love to hear from you all. If you have questions or comments about the show, please send them to community@evolvinghunter.com. Any questions you send in, I'll do my best to either answer them on the show or respond to you via email. And if you want to follow along, make sure that you're subscribed to the Evolving Hunter podcast. We're on Instagram and YouTube at Evolving Hunter Podcast, all one word. We've got loads more conversations and hunting stories coming. And we're also going to work in some practical conversations about skills, ethics, and what it takes to grow as a hunter. So please stick with us and follow along. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep evolving. I really hope you enjoyed that episode of the Evolving Hunter podcast. One last thing before you go. If you're thinking about getting into hunting, before you go and buy gear or plan a hunt, you need the right foundation. That's why we're so excited to be partnered with CertifiedHunter.com. They have state-approved online hunter education that teaches real-world safety, ethics, and responsibility, not just test answers. If you want to start hunting the right way, head to CertifiedHunter.com/evolvinghunter and get certified today.